Awesome. As people join, I'll just get through some of the housekeeping activities because I know people are here to see Sarah and not talk to me about some of the safe harbor statements and things like that. But if Sarah, you want to get started, we can go through that. I do need to let you know that we may have some forward-looking statements that are based on our beliefs and assumptions at this time. And that is all in an effort to be as open and transparent as possible. As we like to do with our customers at ServiceNow. We really want to make sure that we're giving you up-to-date information, and sometimes that stumbles into a little bit of a forward-looking statements, and we want to make sure that you're aware of that, and that you don't take anything as written in stone. But I'm delighted to bring you to this ServiceNow webinar, and I wanted to let you know that we've got future webinars and meetups coming up. So Sarah, if you want to flip, we've got a schedule of events that you can join at any point. Today's session is part of our Live on ServiceNow sessions, which are curated event series that connects you with ServiceNow experts and peers that can really help you deploy your products and achieve value faster. We hope that you can join us again for another webinar or meetup, and you can see the schedule there, or you can look for it in the chat. So definitely access those because we've got a lot of content. From a housekeeping perspective, we will try and save some time for Q&A at the end. So please use the Q&A button rather than the chat button, because we'd like to capture all of that information and be able to get back to you if we need to at the end of the session if we can't answer anything. And we'll have folks on the line that hopefully can answer things during the call. The presentation is being recorded, and it will be shared after the session in the ServiceNow community. And after the event, you're going to be prompted to fill out a short survey. We really appreciate any feedback you can give because it helps us bring you more valuable content. So for today's agenda, we're going to start with an introduction. I'll introduce you to Sarah, and then she'll start to talk a little bit about SecurityBricks and their FedRAMP Accelerator that they built. They will bring you a demo. And then, as I said, we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So definitely, if you can ask your questions in the chat, that's great. And if you need to follow up with us afterwards, I'm Rosalind Morville at ServiceNow.com, and I am a product marketing manager here. But the key person you want to talk to today is Sarah Lang. She's going to be addressing you all and giving you all this really insightful information. Sarah is a solutions-driven security professional with about 25 years of experience analyzing, planning, and leading the implementation of technology solutions to enhance client productivity. She's an expert in information assurance controls and best practices. She has extensive experience in federal, DoD, PCI, HIPAA regulations, you name it, she probably knows it, as well as disaster recovery planning and implementation. She's instrumental in her team's product research and new release evaluations. She's done some she's got deep experience leading and supervising installations and maintenance activities, and she's been involved in the planning, scheduling, and estimating timeframes for implementation products in order to minimize downtime and loss of revenue while completing projects on time and under budget. You'll see today that she's an extremely effective trainer and mentor with strong communication skills. And joining her today is Ahmed Bilal, who was a key developer in bringing the solution to light. So if you do have questions, I think Ahmed will be instrumental in answering those in the Q&A. So bring on your technical questions. If there's something we can't answer, we'll follow up. But otherwise, I just want to pass this to Sarah and say, welcome back. It's really great to work with you again.
It's really great to be back and work with you too. Thank you for the introduction. So I want to talk a little bit about who we are as a company for SecurityBricks. So we are a organization that is a FedRAMP Authorized third-party assessment organization. We also have earned the accreditation of a CMMC, a third-party assessor organization, as well as StateRAMP. And we are ServiceNow partners. Our company does transitioning for veterans to cybersecurity over the last couple of years. We have a program with the DoD to transition people that are coming out of that environment into commercial. And we really have our primary focus is on cloud security and compliance. And this is kind of covering a little bit about deeper into where our focus groups are. As a third-party assessment organization, we are authorized and certified by the FedRAMP PMO to help assist organizations with becoming ready to be successful FedRAMP ATOs, as well as to assess and audit and perform the certification necessary for an organization to get a FedRAMP ATO. We also have our own security software supply chain platform called Appstone. And we specialize in the automation of security and compliance. So before we get started into the actual discussion on the FedRAMP Accelerator, I want to go ahead and cover a couple of glossary terms that you'll hear throughout the presentation. And some of you may know the word FedRAMP, but not necessarily what it stands for. So FedRAMP is the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program. So this is a federal government program that manages the certification and accreditation of all cloud service providers that want to do business with a federal agency. And it establishes the security benchmarks and frameworks of what needs to be in place to manage the risks of federal agency data. An ATO is an authorization to operate. So what that means is that your company has implemented and documented all of the security controls and information necessary to reduce risk to an acceptable level to the federal government. And an ATO means that you have not only implemented the FedRAMP requirements, but that you've had a FedRAMP third-party assessment organization come in and certify your environment. And then the FedRAMP PMO office has looked at that certification package and has agreed and decided to give you basically the green check box. Yes, you have done everything we needed you to do, and you are a company that all of our agencies can do business with. And so that's what an ATO stands for. The FedRAMP sponsorship. So not just anybody can decide to become a FedRAMP ATO organization. So in order to get there, right, there's 3 paths, and we'll kind of talk about that in detail a little bit later. But sponsorship really means is how are you and why are you going to be added to the FedRAMP list? And what that means is you can get what's called a joint authorization board or JAB authorization, which means your product or platform is in such need throughout so many different agencies that they're going to go ahead and sponsor your ATO. That means on their end, they're going to handle doing all of your monthly reporting and reviews and be the ones to look at your 3PAO certification packages. The other option is having an agency sponsorship, meaning there's a federal agency that wants to go out and use your product. And because of that, they're willing to sponsor through the FedRAMP ATO process. And last but not least, there is a program called FedRAMP Ready. So those companies that have solutions that want to be able to sell to the federal government, but let's say they're not approved by the JAB and they don't have an agency sponsor yet. They want to show that they're ready, that they're going to be able to pass that certification and that they're there to do business. So what that means is it's called a FedRAMP Ready designation. A FedRAMP Ready designation is going to mean that you've gone through with the 3PAO, the third-party assessment organization, and they've certified that you have implemented and documented your environment to the level required by the FedRAMP PMO. And you get listed online in the marketplace as being FedRAMP ready, meaning if an agency decides to use your product, they can rest assured you'll be able to do an easy transition to an ATO. Next, we're going to talk about is POA&M. What is a POA&M? POA&M is a plan of action and milestones. This is basically, it's like a running risk register. So a POA&M identifies any weaknesses, findings, vulnerabilities within your environment, and it assesses the inherent and residual risk, tracks any milestones leading up to the remediation of that risk, and also what defense in depth that you put in place to reduce the risk. Next, you're going to hear things like CIS and CRM workbooks. And this really is a document template that the PMO office puts out, and it is around your control implementation. So what controls do you have implemented? How are they implemented? And the customer responsibility metrics. So all of us, I'm sure, have heard the terms, shared responsibility. No matter what cloud provider you're using for your solutions, you know that there's some responsibility that the cloud provider actually assumes, and then there's some that only your company does, and others that might be shared. So it's really important as part of this program is that you understand that and know where that responsibility lies within your environment. All right, so we kind of talked a little bit about this, so I'll go into a little bit of detail here. So this is the process to achieve a FedRAMP authority to operate. All right, so the authorization path, agency, JAB, and readiness designation. These really are your three paths that you have to get into the FedRAMP Marketplace. The Marketplace is an online location at the FedRAMPPMO.gov, and that is where it's going to list your company, your platform, what designation you have. It's almost like a marketing tool for all federal agencies. So any company that wants to go out and purchase a product or a solution can go right to that page and look for solutions within that area and see which ones already have an ATO or are ready. Next, we've got the preparation. So what goes in getting ready to get that famous ATO, right? So there's, readiness assessments, which is the pre-authorization. So you've gone through and you've done all of your own self-assessments. You look at all control requirements that you have, sure implement it correctly, document everything. You've identified a 3PAO that you've engaged that's going to be doing your assessment. And at that point, you get listed in the marketplace, and you go in, it's called in process, meaning you are in the process of getting your ATO. And that also notifies all of the agencies where you're at. Next is getting authorized. So what happens after all that work is done, right? And basically, you're going to have the 3PAO is going to put together a package to deliver to your agency sponsor, if you have one, to the JAB and to the PMO office for FedRAMP. And that package is going to include all of your documented program that you've provided, such as your system security plan, your policies and procedures, your control implementation summaries, and shared responsibilities. Also, it's going to include the risk assessment report from that 3PAO and their recommendations. And that's going to go in, and that is actually going to get reviewed. And at that point, it will either get authorized and you'll receive your ATO or your ready designation, or it will not. If during that process they feel that there is going to be too much risk, there is the option for them to deny that. Once you get that designation that you're looking for, you'll go into continuous monitoring. And the continuous monitoring basically is going to give you, it's a series of controls, requirements, and processes that you have to have in place that you report on a regular basis. This slide here we're going to talk about is FedRAMP Rev 5 compliance. So what does that mean? FedRAMP recently released their updated version of Rev 5 to align with the NIST 853 Rev 5 framework that is available. On here, this is all of the different control families within the FedRAMP Rev 5 that would need to be implemented. And we have mapped those to the NIST CSF, the cybersecurity framework of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And what that means is these are the higher arching control families that you must have implemented to secure your solution. Once there are new control families that have been added under the Rev 5 release, they were not there.
Sarah, I'm having a little bit of feedback. I'm not sure if anyone else is.
Is this any better?
That is actually better. Yes, thank you.
So that includes the PII processing and transparency, program management, and the supply chain risk management, which is a really key feature that's been added. As we hear every day in the news, between the breaches and the cyber incidents that are happening, it can take nothing more than a weakness in someone in your supply chain to affect the security of your platform and the data that resides in it. Excuse me. Next, we'll talk a little bit about these FedRAMP baselines. So FedRAMP uses what's called FIPS 199, and it's the Federal Information Processing Standard to evaluate the level of risk and impact to the federal agencies and where your product solution would reside. So the general three basic categories is low, moderate, and high. So this is based on, what your platform does, the types of data it's going to have, right? So low baseline is going to have 156 controls that you have to implement that fall into that previous slide's control families. Moderate baseline, which is really where you're going to get the bulk of most people falling, has got 323. And then as you can see, you jump significantly higher into the higher risk and higher impact areas of 410 controls. Now, we talk about this FedRAMP process, but why is not more people and more platforms up there? FedRAMP isn't easy to implement. It's got a lot of moving parts. It's a very well-documented program. And it does require an organization to be very thoughtful in their implementations and all of their standard operating procedures, and to be able to communicate and document how they've secured their environment. And with that said, there's always going to be pain points when you're implementing any type of new security program. Some of those most common ones are things like the authorization boundary diagram. So this is something, especially in today with agile development, microservices, that your authorization boundary is very dynamic in nature. It needs to include all systems, apps, third-party vendors, processes that touch the FedRAMP system. So anything that processes, stores, transmit, or has access to one of those systems would fall within your boundary. So understanding your data flow can sometimes mean meeting with a lot of different departments and people to truly map that back. It's really based on your computing environment, and it can be very complicated to design. And then there's the SSP. So the SSP, this is basically the core document. Okay,
Sarah, I'm getting the feedback again.
Okay. Yeah, it moved. How's that?
Good. If you just start back talking about the SSP.
Sure. So the SSP is really going to be your core document. And in that document, you're looking at about anywhere from 500 to 600 pages and onwards of documenting your environment. This includes everything from the types of roles that are used within your environment or solution, your data flow, your boundary description and diagrams, how you've implemented each one of the controls that you need to implement, your procedures, your policies, a description of your solution. So it's very long. It's a big process. It's a big document to actually produce, and then it must be maintained as well. The SSP is used as the core document for a 3PAO to build their test plans and to do your audit. The POA&M, which is the plan of action and milestone, right? This is that running risk register I mentioned earlier. And this is where all of your assessments and continuous monitoring and any findings and gaps that you have is going to be documented. So if you can't fix something, if it's still in place, if you've identified it, it's going to go into that POA&M. That POA&M is submitted to your agency sponsor every month. And there's tracking of what's open, what's new, what's closed, movement or changes to any milestones or missed milestones as well. All critical and high vulnerabilities that are listed in your POA&M will need to be resolved within 30 days. Medium or moderate would be 90 days, and low vulnerabilities within 180 days. Next is that inherited shares responsibility controls. So this is something that causes a lot of pain for a lot of people, because you have to really kind of dig really deep into your relationship and what's provided by your CSP. This is where you have to identify what's fully going to be covered by your CSP. Let's say, for an example, physical security controls for the data center, right? Those are something that's fully inherited, but how have they implemented those controls? You'll need to be able to understand that, because it's important for you to understand all of the layers of security on your environment. Partially inherited, let's say that they're responsible for the overall arching environment, for the network and the routing, but you're responsible for your own rules. And of course, that's the CIS and CRM workbook that we talked about previously. And that will be reviewed with all parties before the FedRAMP package is submitted. Next is the continuous monitoring. So there's all this work people talk about getting ready to get authorized for any type of FedRAMP. You're implementing it's to be documents. You go ahead and sit down with your 3PAOs. But what happens next? Next is continuous monitoring. So continuous monitoring is a part of FedRAMP where the audit isn't just a one and done. It's you're monitoring your environment for any changes, any new vulnerabilities. You're making sure the things you say that you do are being done. Are you looking and revalidating all your privileged accounts? Are you making sure that there's not enabled active accounts that haven't been logged into by people that maybe have left? If the people's permissions that are associated with their account, the correct permissions for their current role? Are you identifying any potential events and investigating them to find out if you've had an incident, right? All these different kind of categories and things that we do day to day. And then that needs to be documented, is how do I run my security program moving forward in a continuous monitoring state? And then that gets reported on. So these are kind of the main pain points that we're going to address here within the FedRAMP application here in ServiceNow. So the FedRAMP Accelerator that we've built is built to integrate with the existing reporting capabilities of the ServiceNow GRC module. It's going to provide you with real-time visibility. It's going to allow you to get status and progress on all your CNA activities. So your KRIs and KPIs that you've already built are already going to be usable within the FedRAMP Accelerator. The tool is really set to enable all collaboration. As you know, anytime you're rolling out a new program, it's not just one department that's responsible for it. You're having to have communications and feedback and receive information from all various teams within the organization. It's been developed to provide a centralized repository. So I'm sure everyone here knows what it's like to go out to various file sharing sites and services and have to look for the most current version of a document, or having to take multiple versions that people provided input on and marry them together, making sure that all the information in that document is up to date. It just takes time. So the FedRAMP Accelerator does that for you within the Accelerator. It allows you to keep track of all of your related artifacts and evidence from within ServiceNow modules and extending to your cloud environment, as well as streamlining the entire ATO lifecycle by automating assessments and evidence gathering. Next, we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of those features, like how do we address those pain points? We're able to, within the Accelerator, provide evidence for 44 inherited and 114 shared FedRAMP controls from Azure and AWS today, and we'll be continuing to expand out to other CSPs. We can automate 65% of evidence collection of the 323 moderate controls. So what does this mean to you? This means that, let's say you're using ITSM or DevOps or SecOps within ServiceNow, is there are indicators that are built to automatically go into your ServiceNow modules and pull out the information and say, hey, here's your evidence. And by the way, this is compliant. Or I noticed that you're doing something different over here in ITSM that isn't aligned with FedRAMP, so it's not compliant. Right? There's a set of comprehensive questionnaires with guidance and types of evidence you're going to need to provide on how you should be implementing those controls. There's FedRAMP templates that you can produce right out of ServiceNow, out of our app, that's going to be able to be part of your package that you're going to present to your 3PAO, such as your SSP and your POA&M. So because you're using a tool, you're using the application to gather this information and automatically pull this information, we're able to take all of that and everything with the application and build out assessments for you. That means you, as when somebody else something changed, or when you're sitting down and having to write your SSP, right? Instead of having to copy and paste and retype everything out of the platform you're using, we'll automatically pull that in and build it out for you, so you don't have to sit there spending all those hours. Next is the POA&M, the Plan of Action and Milestones. Right? This is a document that has to be submitted every single month. It's a running live document. Because you're managing your risks and your remediation projects within the ServiceNow, we can track all of that. Milestone changed, new milestone added. When you generate that POA&M, it's going to automatically update all of that information and you can pull it out. You're importing your vulnerabilities into ServiceNow and managing your vulnerability remediation through ServiceNow. We'll be able to add all of those new vulnerabilities that meet the criteria to go into your POA&M and track those for you as well. So no more trying to copy and paste from a vulnerability scanner report into your POA&M. We'll do that for you. and the evidence, of course, that's going to be collected. Next, what are we doing for the continuous monitoring and reporting side, right? So there are connectors built for the AWS Security Hub and Azure Security to allow for easy importing of your security configurations to ServiceNow, integrating cloud security into compliance management. You can also, as mentioned earlier, fully integrated with your Now dashboards. So out of the box, there's several reports, KRI and KPI dashboards that you can use to help communicate the status of your FedRAMP program internally. There's automation of those monthly reports, such as the POA&M and the deviation request forms that must be submitted. So now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to turn this over to Ahmed, and he's going to show you a demo of the FedRAMP Accelerator.
Thank you, Sarah. So basically, our FedRAMP Accelerator has fundamentally two parts. The first one, as Sarah explained, is the authorization boundaries. Here we define the table name and the filtering condition to get the evidence for the authorization officers in this authorization package. So if I go into one of this authorization boundary, we see it's having an authorization filter. And in the authorization filter, we give it a table name and a filtering condition. On this basis, we get 26 records matching from this table, depending upon the filtering condition. Once we are done with the boundary filter, the next step would be to create an authorization package. So once the boundary is defined, we get the system elements. We can see 26 system elements. Then we are going to create an authorization package. We have one for account management over here. If we go in this record, so authorization package will have 7 steps that are namely prepared, categorize, select, implement, assess, and authorize, and monitoring state. So first step would be prepare, where it will ask you the name of the authorization package and also the authorizing official. So this one stakeholder will be giving approvals on different states. So we need approval on categorize, select, and authorize state. So authorizing official will be approving these approvals. So once we're done through the prepare state, we can move forward to the next step, that is categorize. In this state, we are basically overriding an impact statement. And we can give it whatever we want. For example, I just gave it moderate. And we can just forward to the next step. In the select state, we will have all of the baseline controls that are moderate for this demo. And in select state, what we are able to do, we can do control tailoring on all those controls that we have in our FedRAMP Accelerator. So for example, we can select the ones we need, or for example, if we are doing a yearly assessment, so we can just have all of those controls in there and just skip the step as it is. And we'll have all the baseline controls for the authorization and the SSP. So once we are done with the tailoring of the controls, we can just select, move to next step, that's implement. Once we are in the implement state, the controls are going to be generated on the basis of the selected baseline controls over here. So for example, we have 5 of the baseline controls selected, so it's going to create 5 controls. Also, what else we can do in this state, we can go in there in these controls and we can send in the assessment. Assessment would be the set of questions that are mapped to the control objective or the control. For example, for this control, AU61, the assessment questions will look like something like this. So once the control is sent to a test state, that we can just do like this, select the ones that we need to send to the stakeholder. For example, we need to send these 2. We can just go and select action on all of these selected items and do it in a test. Once they're done, the assessment is sent to the control owner. So in this case, I'm the control owner for all of these controls. So as we can see, the state changed to a test state. Once the state changes to a test state, the owner is going to get an assessment that he's going to take. For example, in this control, I already have taken the assessment and it says compliant. It says compliant because we have selected the right answers in the assessment questions, for example, fully implemented. And we give them an evidence for that and a brief description and also a control origination. We can also look into the responses of the controls. That will be right here in attestation and inside the control. So as we can see, the percentage of answered question is 100%, and we can review the responses on this side. We can see the attachment, the description, and the control origination. Once we're done with the implement state, we can move to the next state. That's assess. In the assess state, we get the poems created if we have any controls that are not implemented or not the right answers. And also we create the control tests. The next step of this authorization package would be authorize. In this step, we need approval, so we can select request approval. Once we do the request approval, the authorizing official will get this approval, and he needs to approve it to create the SSP. SSP would contain all of the baseline controls that we had selected and the questions that the stakeholders answered to those assessments, and we can have them into this document in this state. So for example, it will look something like So this will be the SSP document with all the information of this authorization package and all the steps that we went through. And by the end of this document, we will have the responses of those assessments and all mapped to this document. That will be the second last step of this. And then we can, once all the assessments or the controls are attested and they're answered, we'll have compliant, not compliant over here. Once we are done, we can just send it to the next state. That's the final state, that's monitoring. And we can monitor all the controls from there. And that's it. Sarah?
Hi, let me go back. All right, thank you very much, Holly. So next we're going to talk about extending the accelerator. So we have a solution that extends on top of the accelerator right now, which includes the cloud connections to your AWS and Azure so that we can automatically go in and pull in your evidence and any artifacts and do your continuous monitoring for you automatically. As well as additional inherited controls content and the indicator templates. So those indicator templates will be able to validate and check within all of your ServiceNow modules on whether or not something's compliant, be able to alarm you and give you alerts if you fall out of compliance quickly, as well as being able to pull the evidence necessary from those modules and from your CSP for all of the various controls within FedRAMP. Then there's additional enhanced dashboards that are FedRAMP specific that are available as well. And then the solution also includes some validation. So being able to have team of FedRAMP assessors to validate your readiness and your package before you engage with your 3PAO, as well as actually doing what's called a mock audit. So the SecurityBricks FedRAMP team will do validation of your control implementations and the self-assessment and preparedness that you've done, as well as being able to work with you to do an actual mock audit to make sure your team's ready to engage with your 3PAO to help ensure that you have a successful outcome from that audit.
I've gotten a couple of email addresses. If you didn't get a chance to send your email address or you're following up on this recording after it's been posted in the community, by all means, you can email me at rosalind.morville@servicenow.com. I'm happy to share this over with the folks at SecurityBricks or your rep internally at ServiceNow would definitely be able to help. So thanks so much for the time. I appreciate you coming on and listening to us. I appreciate the demos and the wealth of information that you always share, Sarah. So thank you for joining us today. And
Absolutely.
give everybody a fantastic Thursday afternoon.